most self-help and self-development books today, for the last 20 years, shall we say, are really about tips and techniques, kind of how to hack the system. They're more insight books, quick reads, and there's benefit to them all. I've read many of them. I've interviewed many of their authors here. But back in the day, Jim Rohn was talking about how to develop your philosophy. And so what I thought is maybe some of you aren't that familiar with Jim. So I'm going to go back in time here. In 2003, the last time Jim Rohn and Zig Ziglar were on stage together was at our Mastermind Summit. It was one of the great thrills of my life. And Jim talked on philosophy and Zig talked about motivation. And those two things together, to me, make up a great, great recipe for success. So we had the two lads on stage together, and it was a dream come true for the two old veterans and the young up-and-comer at the time. And so we're going to go and listen to a couple of minutes of Jim talking about philosophy. And if you're new to him, this will be hopefully an introduction for you to find out more about Jim Rohn. And if you've been very familiar with Jim, this will give you a warm fuzzy listening to the man's voice. So let's go back to 2003 and hear Jim on stage at Mastermind. And what would be the greatest insight you could give him about develop their own personal philosophy?
Well, the major part of our future is going to be shaped by our personal philosophy. And philosophy is a big subject that embraces everything to begin with. Where did we come from? Where are we going? What's the meaning of life? All of that. And then there's economic philosophy, there's social philosophy, there's political philosophy. I've been lecturing in Russia. The communists taught capital belongs to the state, not the people. That was their economic and political philosophy. We've been teaching all these years what? Capital belongs to the people, not the state. What a difference in philosophy. So philosophy shapes the country, philosophy shapes the community, philosophy shapes the church, philosophy shapes our own personal lives. So philosophy is what we've learned and what we've heard and what we've seen, what we've experienced, and the decisions we've made from what we've learned. That shapes our philosophy, whether it's economic or social or personal or whether it's spiritual. And that's the beginning of working on a new life and a new direction is learning to alter your philosophy. One of the first ones that helped me was my economic philosophy. I met this man when I was 25 years old, and he said, "Show me your current economic plan." And of course, I didn't have one. And I said, "Well, I'm probably spending a little more than I'm making." And he said, "Who sold you on that?" And I thought, wow, I've picked it up somewhere along the way. And he said, "Couldn't we start making some changes in your economic philosophy to start that would change now the future of your life?" And I said, "I suppose we could," and that's what we did. So don't spend more than you make. Because I found back then it was easy to make $5,000 a month and go broke. And someone back then said, "How could you make $5,000 a month and go broke?" And I said, "Spend $6,000. So all of that started to shape my life. And then I found out your income is determined by your philosophy, not by the economy. And once I learned that, I thought, well, guys, then I don't have to work on the economy. All I have to do is work on my personal philosophy.
Wow. Gives me the goosebumps listening to him. And he's such a sage, such a sage. And today in a world that's drowning in information, boy, we could use some wisdom. And I'm very thankful for the wisdom he passed on to me. And I'm going to try and pass it on to you. You know, philosophy by definition is a theory or attitude held by a person or organization that acts as a guiding principle for behavior. So what's the philosophy? And it's the philosophy comes first, so the action comes second. And the way I teach this when I talk to people about it is I talk about salt. You know, we're talking to you're the salt of the earth. Well, salt is made up of sodium and chloride. And if you take sodium by itself, it'll kill you. If you take chloride by itself, it will kill you. But you put it together, it's the greatest spice the world has ever known. So just like philosophy is like the sodium and action is like the chloride. A lot of people in business, they're all chloride. Action, 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 action. And they keep making the same mistakes over and over again. You got to have the philosophy. So here's some tips here on developing your own philosophy. So the first thing is, what are you working for? You know, what are you working for? You know, remember why you started in the first place. Why did you start in business? What are you actually working for? And so what is it that, got you going into this in the first place? And for me, it was, obviously I'm an immigrant. I have no resources. I always felt that economic need and scarcity. And I wanted to build a life and a business of my own. I wanted to be able to impact people. That was a passion of mine. I wanted to be able to take care of my family and basically create an environment where my kids, before they even knew I had kids, right? I mean, that they would be able to do what they were put on earth to do. And so that's worked out for me. And that philosophy was what I was working for. So Zig, he would say, motivation is what gets you started, but it's habit is what keeps you going, was one of his personal philosophies there. When you know what you want and you want it badly enough, you'll find a way to get it. And in the debates with him and Zig, he would talk about motivation versus philosophy. He'd say, motivation alone's not enough. If you have an idiot and you motivate him, now all you have is a motivated idiot, right? So Jim was a character. But he'd ask you, what are you writing for? He'd ask you, what are you working for? The second thing he'd say is write goals. And many of you have heard me talk about goals. I've physically put more people through the act of goal writing than anybody in the world. Over 3 million people have done goal writing with me in person. And Jim was big on goals. Zig was big on goals for different approaches to it. When it came to goals, Jim would say, there's no telling what you can do when you get inspired by them. There's no telling what you can do when you believe in them. There's no telling what will happen when you act upon them. Another great quote of his was, I find it fascinating that most people plan their vacations with better care than they do their lives. Perhaps that's because escape is easier than change. No doubt. And then he used to say, we all need lots of powerful long-range goals to help us pass the short-term obstacles. So what are you working for is kind of like the purpose. Writing out your goals, well, that becomes the plan. And then Nike, just do it. Just do it. Jim used to say life responds to deserve, not to need. It doesn't say if you need, you will reap. It says if you'll plant, you'll reap. And Jim was big on reaping and sowing. You got to reap and you got to sow, and you got to get busy planting. He'd go pity the person who wants to reap a harvest who never planted a seed. And he's right. And we live in a world today that a lot of people want the harvest and they don't want to dig up the ground. They don't want to plant the seed. They don't want to water and fertilize it. They just want the result. And you got to do the work. The few who do are the envy of the many who only watch, he would say. You must get good at one of two things, planting in the spring or begging in the fall. Man, I can hear him say that. So as you develop your philosophy, what are you working for? Write out those goals and then just do it. Thanks for watching. If you want more tips on how to think, feel, and do better, check out these videos too. Oh, by the way, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave us a like if you enjoyed the content.